All right, hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about certs. So my presentation is certs up, how to make the most of certifications, and based on my personal experience. So a lot of you probably don't know me. Kind of old. Uh, so my name's Tenchi. I'm a super senior currently, so fifth year. Still BS, surprisingly. I'm originally from Las Vegas, pretty far away. I was part of the U.S. cyber team. You might have heard from a person called Chandy. I'm a huge weeb. I love anime. I decided not to include a picture that I usually have on here for good taste. I worked at Google this summer, and I've also worked at SRA. So why am I qualified to talk about certifications today? Well, first up, disclaimer, I'm not sponsored. All these opinions are my own. Opinions do not equal potential employers or companies. Why am I qualified? So currently I hold 4 certifications. So I have the OSCP, the GSEC offered by SANS, the GCP's CDL certificate, which is just a beginner GCP cert, and another SANS cert called GFAC. It's relatively new. But yeah, I have 4 certifications. I'm currently working on a couple more through SANS as well as Altered Security, which I will get into. So let's talk about career paths and cybersecurity. This is really geared towards the new members. So for specifically certs, you have 3 career paths that have certs that are really applicable. So red team is offensive security. So think about pen testing. And then blue team is more SOC work, security operations center, where you're defending against threats. Detection engineering as well falls into that. And then security engineering and DevOps, which is more tool oriented, where you're developing tools for the company that are security oriented. So yeah, I'm going to talk about offensive certs. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you have already heard of offensive security and the certs they offer. OSCP is like the cert to have if you're starting off in offensive security and pen testing. And so it's most commonly revered as like the top of the class certification. Not top of the class, but very hard barrier to entry and very difficult for first timers. And then OffSec offers additional certs that are beyond that. OSWE, which is web app pen testing. That's more focused on the white box, so where you have direct access to the code and you can find vulnerabilities through there. OSED, which is focused on binary exploitation, where you're focused on exploiting Windows binaries to get unintended functionality or remote code execution. And then OSEP, which is the advanced penetration testing. So it's like the one above OSCP, which is focused on defense evasion techniques where you're bypassing EDR, antivirus, and a lot of those techniques are taught there. And so OffSec's very common in the industry, and these certs will typically be sort of a step up or required when you're going for senior positions, such as senior pen tester or offensive positions. And so they're highly valued. Now I'd want to talk about more alternative certs. I wouldn't like to say really alternative because they're sort of growing in popularity. And so Altered Security is another good training company. So they offer more than those, but these are the 3 main ones for offensive security that I see as very important. So CRTP is their beginner cert, and CRTE is advanced, which covers Azure pen testing, and CRTP is like the highest level they have, which is multiple Azure domain pen testing. sorry, Entra ID now. You got to remember that it's no longer Azure. But why I'd like to bring up these alternative certs is because the high cost of offensive security certs. So OffSec certs typically is going to run you about $1,500, which is insanely expensive. But these alternative certs are a lot cheaper, ranging from $200 to $500. So about 1/3 the price, and good material as well. So I've been focusing on my CRT pen testing, which covers Active Directory pen testing, and it's very in-depth. And so while the OSCP is focused on like your basic pen testing skills, so initial foothold, privilege escalation, and then some AD pen testing, it is very basic. And on the other hand, alternate security is all AD focused, where you're learning a lot more about evasion techniques and lateral movement, privesc, in a much deeper format. So next is the 0-point security, which is more focused on holistic red team. And what I mean by that is it's more focused on the internal pen testing throughout the whole process, where you're generating payloads for initial foothold, enumeration and privilege escalation and lateral movement at a much more broad sense, where it's more realistic in terms of what you actually do on a red team engagement. And so it's very comparable to what I did in SRA as a intern. And so you're generating those payloads, and it's very up and coming for these certs. So CRTO and CRTO2. All right. I think I covered all that. So next up, we're going to move on to the second branch of career paths, so blue team and security engineering. I kind of lump these together because of how similar they are in terms of certs. So whether you're directly working with SOC or you're doing engineering, you're going to interact with a multitude of cloud platforms and tool-specific vendors, such as Splunk. So kind of lump these together. But in general, your cert path is going to be very job specific. So each job uses their own tools and they have their own environment, whether they be using AWS, Azure, and GCP, or different hardware tools, Palo Altos, Cisco's for networking equipment. And so going into the cloud provider certs, again, very job specific, but to differentiate both of them, all three of them, the AWS is very beginner focused and covers all the cloud services that AWS offers. Same with Azure, but I like to talk a little bit about the GCP cert, which I think is a unique one out of all three of them, where it talks about the business aspect more than it does the just the core services, and it really emphasizes on digital transformation and all the cloud buzzwords. But it's a lot harder from what I've heard compared to the other certs. And then tool specific, you get your Palos, Splunk, Elastic. So these are tools that you might be working with when you're building out detections and sort of retuning your alerts in SOC work. All right. And sort of MISC certs that aren't really covered in the general 3 career paths. So if you want to get into digital forensics, there are a couple of SANS certs that you can get. SANS certs are offered by a company called GIAC, and they are pretty expensive. A cert attempt can go about 3K, and the entire course with the material is about 8K, 10K. Oh, I forgot the price of these certs. So all the foundational cloud certs are about $100 each for the attempt. You can find a multitude of free resources, practice tests online. So yeah, and then the tool specific ones can range about from 300 to 500. Really depends on what level you're going for. So the general rule is that the more harder it is, the more expensive it's going to get. Okay, back to here. So DFIR, you have the GCFA and then GCIH, which are going to be your entry certs to get into those fields. And another career path is vulnerability research and reverse engineering. There are also a couple of SANS certs here in this career path, but also sort of an up-and-coming cert that I see. It's Zero to Automated. They have a full course on reverse engineering, and I'm seeing a lot on Twitter, so I thought I'd include that. Now, the real question is, how do I get certified? I've talked a lot about prices, the difficulty, and you might be very concerned about that since, certs is a good way to advance your career. So usually you'll have your co-op or employer provide you the training. So, for example, this summer I was able to get certified for the GCP because I was doing a lot of GCP work, and my manager said, okay, you're getting this now. And so it's a very good way to get certs and get started with that. There are also scholarships that are offered for getting certifications. So a big one that we push in Contagion is CyberStart. So CyberStart is a collegiate program to build up the cybersecurity workforce. And so it's a CTF style competition where you do a bunch of CTFs. It's a very zero to hero beginner CTF. But if you place high enough in this competition, you'll be offered to take the GFACT cert. And if you're top of the class if you score high enough in the GFACT, you're also offered the SANS certificate program. So the SANS certificate program allows you to take an additional 3 more certs with SANS. And so that's all free, all scholarship. And so highly recommend CyberStart. Or you're like me where you buy it with your own money. Don't do this. It's not a good financial decision because of how expensive it is. Like I bought the OSCP with my own money. I took it, and that really took a huge hit on my bank account. So I don't really recommend that, but if you really want to, then go for it. But again, I don't really recommend that. All right. So in conclusion, just talking about certs in general, it's very good to advance your career, but on-the-job training or OTJ is a lot more important. Your experience is valued over certs, so all the projects and classes and the interpersonal skills that you have when applying for jobs is a lot more important than having one badge on your LinkedIn or something. And certs are not expected. So going into this intern versus full-time argument, so everybody in this room is in a very good position because you're in a very great environment. RITSEC provides a lot of resources, a lot of connections, and so you're not going to really have this issue. But for full-time, it's a lot different. So the skill level between interns versus full-time is it's just vastly different. Full-time employees or full-time hires are expected to have a lot more experience than interns. And so that was the case with a lot of listings that I saw within offensive security, where you have all these cert requirements. But generally, all of these are sort of HR flags, and if you get through that, you shouldn't have too big of an issue. And if you're going for certs, the last advice I'd like to give is pick, choose, and commit. A lot of these certs have sort of a lower tier, like I wouldn't say lower tier, but like more beginner focused. But if you have enough skill and if you're confident and you want to get a certain level of cert, you should just go for it. Don't really back down from the challenge. And so I'll put this as an example. The OSCP has a couple of sort of more beginner focused certs like EJPT offered by INE and like PNPT, a lot of different beginner certs. But if your main focus is to get the OSCP, and if you're really going for that, just full send. Don't back down. All right, that's it. Oh, oops. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Any questions?
As a person or student looking to, let's say, get their first cert, what would you recommend? One, what would you recommend? Two, what would you recommend their plan to pay for it to be?
Right.
Expensive, right?
Yep, certs are very expensive. So if you really want to start in your cert journey, I think EJPT is a good start if you're first year. It's very basic and the material is pretty solid. In terms of saving for the cert, again, this is going to be really hard. Use your co-op money if you can. Start saving if you're looking to get the OSCP. But yeah, other than that, all the methods I've talked about previously, scholarship, any scholarships that you can apply for. Yeah.
I think you briefly touched on it, but as an intern, what is your experience been like getting your co-op to pay for certs, especially some of the more pricey ones, the SANS and the OSCP?
So, getting your employer to pay for more advanced certs like the OSCP or SANS courses is near to impossible. The only types of certs that they're going to be willing to pay for is more of the beginner sort of blue team focused certs, like the cloud provider certs or the tool specific certs. And even when you are onboarded as a full-time employee, you aren't typically going to be allowed to get those courses until maybe you've completed 6 months, a year, 2 years. Yeah, it really depends for that, I'd say. Yeah.